Awesome. Hello, everybody. My name is Kevin Kotchek. I'm the founder CEO of Chemical Q Device. Here for discussion. This is 105, October 19th, 2023. And this is FDA artificial intelligence / machine learning medical device guidelines, and also with potential QML, meaning quantum machine learning submissions to this. So this first slide is basically showing some of the key steps that you would take for filing a submission with the FDA, such as the human AI team, having a good software engineering practices, organizational excellence, and we'll cover some of these as well. So the first thing I want to cover is actually today. So is October 19th, 2023, and the FDA did their yearly posting of new medical AI ML, SAMD, or software as medical devices, up on the web. So if you used last year's link, that is now updated to today with 171 additional ones. So this chart that I've been, that's available on the web, shows up until last year's, 2022. And where it kind of cuts off is the 91 is basically somewhere July last year of 2022. So it's going to add some to the 2022. It's likely going to be higher than the 115. And then you're also going to get, a significant amount more for 2023. And of course, this year has not ended. So it's kind of analogous to that 91 stars where we're at now with 2023. And so I included here at the top, so basically this whole process, so, there's been AI ML algorithms before, but they've been relatively locked. So you train a model and you don't make any real, other modifications to it. And in this case, in recent years, it's all about having these continuously updating models where if you get new patient data or different type of data set, say a new manufacturer you want to, be compatible with them. There's a number of things which are considered, that you don't have to go on and file a new 510K. So I'll be explaining some of these terms. So the first is a discussion paper. The second is software as medical device action plan. The third is this GMLP, which is very easy to understand, I believe, as opposed to reading, 20 pages, which I've done a couple times. And I'm going to include some of the expert speakers. So it was an MIT presentation with Andy Korovos and Mark Shirvey. And then this B is important. Zach does a number of talks at Harvard and Stanford. He's an attorney. So he's fluent with FDA. And this last one here with C is the former FDA commissioner on CNBC. And as you can see here, so what's new with quantum is basically so you have bits and then you can do quantum physics with it, and now you have qubits. So it's not like this whole brand new thing that has to change. And I'll go over different aspects of model speed and performance, emerging circuit architectures, like different types of quantum algorithms that you can use and will likely give better performance, and probable benefit versus probable risk, which is a staple for FDA, for any new submission. It has to have probable benefit. And so this, as far as this goes, most of you focusing on, say, like the algorithm robustness, and I'll get a touch because Zach is a lawyer and he's more up here, but you can see it's a path, and the quicker you understand FDA and how things work, especially with today's flexibility with algorithms, in hospitals, the quicker potentially you can get to submission. So this is the first. So this is kind of like the focal point paper. It's the discussion paper. So software as medical devices, basically to treat, diagnose, cure, mitigate, or prevent disease or other conditions. Now today, the trend is giving the AI or the machine learning more and more power as far as authority, like say a final diagnosis, these types of things. So this is where it kind of gets, like if you're in a specific area with your medical device, jumping too far into saying like, oh, we're just partially relying on this for diagnosis to full power for diagnosis, that's where you might have to submit a new 510K. And the ones that are not considered devices or anything like healthcare administration, lifestyle, electronic health records, and data transfers there. And the next generation is basically, the GMLP and the action plan that I'll be covering tier 2 is considered this new total product lifecycle where you're actually like, you have great regard for it's called a post-market, medical device, meaning it's been approved. And then, there's certain things that you can do to further improve the performance of it, even though it's been approved. So software's medical device can now support additional manufacturers, and you could do some of these things before, but the FDA has been very progressive as far as, now you can, have something that now performs even better than it did last week because you made, an approved change to it in a data set, for instance. Now, changing, like I said, from an aid in diagnosis to a definitive diagnosis is more difficult. And it's best seen in some of these illustrations I'll have up here. Now, this predetermined change control plan is basically, under this TPLC, and you have your software's medical device, and they call it pre-specification. So that's called SPS. Now, this is basically, it defines anticipated intended use changes that would occur in the future. Now, an algorithm change protocol is the exact how the algorithm can be changed in the future, right? So one's more high level, one's more lower level with the ACP. And I'll go over this a little bit more, but post-market real world performance is basically that, like, it's on the market and, you're able to make changes to it to improve accuracy, decrease loss, those types of things. Now, this is an important, so what this is basically saying is, if you look at the figure 3 at the bottom, it's a previously approved software as medical device with SPS and ACP, like this new system that we're all under, if you want to, submit for approval. And this is basically say, like, if you already have this, then you go to the right, and then you're trying to avoid a new 510K, okay? So this SPS and ACP process through these different, paths that you can take, they can vary from, basically you're just documenting something. So this is an endpoint, this documentation. And then you could also, it's a focus FDA review. So it's a, more stringent review with SPS and ACP. And then, a key term is if your medical device is basically intended for a new use, that's a huge sign that you're probably going to have to file a new submission, like a 510K, usually, sometimes de novo. But if you see that term intended for a new use, that typically means it's like it's gone, you're wanting it to do something that it was previously not meant to do under your first approval. And if there's any questions, feel free to raise your hand. Now, this is the action plan. It's actually newer, 2021. And the cool part about this one is it included all of their different efforts, the IEEE, ISO, IEC, AMI, which Stanford, BSI, and they now have FDA liaisons, for these other organizations. And they're also a member of Xavier AI, and IMDRF is very, tied in with the FDA as well. And then they've done things as far as like meeting with, this is patient engagement in October 2020. And then these kind of centers at UC San Francisco, Stanford, so 2 in the West Coast, and then the East Coast is the Johns Hopkins with that to, assist to, I think it's at a good stage right now as far as like the dust has settled, the meetings have, taken place. And now we're getting a lot of these, approvals with algorithms that, can change even after they're submitted for market approval. So here we go here. So better healthcare machine learning model utilization. So issues such as race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status can be better addressed now. And especially if you have historical data that has bias with it, that's an issue. And, this is slightly different, but algorithm robustness is basically when you do code to change things, if you're trying to, make things, more inclusive, is that it can actually, offset performance while you're trying to address bias, right? So I would say it's a lot of this stuff is just, on a scale of, 0 to 10, like between 9 and 10, as far as the understanding that the FDA has of artificial intelligence and the level of, different changes you can do to it. And it's it seems like they did a very good job with it. Now, advancing real-world medical machine learning, there's been pilots. So like I said, the whole thing with these most recent years submission approvals has been that it's approved on the market, and then you want to change it somehow after it's approved with data sets and other tunings, perhaps hyperparameters, if that's allowed in that case. That it's they did these pilots to replicate that before you would have an actual medical device on the market to see how things would go. Now, here's the good machine learning practice. So it's GMLP, and it's analogous to if you have good lab practice or good manufacturing, GMP or GLP, like if you've been in labs before. But basically, having multidisciplinary expertise is key. Good software engineering, clinical study participants and data sets are representative. Now, if you get into machine learning, you always want data in your training set that's representative of, say in this case, the intended patient population. However, this next step might kind of shock you that training data sets are independent of test sets. So meaning that, to be this, good organization, you should have different data, different parts of the country. It shouldn't just have like a big pile of data, randomize it, which is common to do, and then split it between training and testing. So that's trying to get away from that approach. Now, the next thing, selected reference data sets are based on best available, meaning that like you have to do your best with it. Now, 6, model design is tailored to the available data and reflects the intended use. Okay, so here's another thing, the intended use, right? So anytime like you start, if you have this, market approval for your device and things start shifting away from the intended use with data, that's trending more towards, having to have a different submission for it. And then the focus is placed on the performance. The human AI team is 7. And number 8, testing demonstrates device performance during clinically relevant. Okay, so, you have to get as close as you can without, having your device approved, with, the research that you do to get an approval. Users are provided clear, essential information. And, this might be like the hospital staff that's conducting the machine learning. Deployed models are monitored for performance, and retraining risks are managed. So again, like if you're trying to address bias, but if you're losing model performance while you do that, which is pretty common, these are the types of things that have been factored. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand. And looking at this diagram, it always helps to what I put, and this is actually what they wrote, in the actual document. It's an overlay of FDA, so their total performance life cycle approach on AI ML. So you see a lot of loops, going on here as far as iterative, trying to make it better. We're going to start with number 1. So it's the culture of quality, and you'll hear this term, organizational excellence. So this could be like huge organization, well-funded, history of good, submissions, especially approvals, kind of like having a good relationship with the FDA. Now, number 2, pre-market assurance of safety and effectiveness. Okay. So, while this is all going on, the boxes in the white are developmental. So that means that like you'll see this green arrow go back up, and it's, that's the cycle, right? Retraining and adjusting things over in the white. And the gray boxes are AI production models. So out of this 2, you have new live data, deployed model, and then model monitoring. And then eventually you're trying to get to 3, which is a review of the software's medical device, which is SPS, and ACP control. So this should be something that's on the market. So number 3 is basically saying it's on the market. We have our PCCP, which has SPS, which is SAM pre-specs, and algorithm change control. The SPS is saying, okay, this could happen. We're aware of this situation that can happen in the future. And the ACP, or algorithm change protocol, is basically saying like, these are the exact things that will be done if that happens with the SPS, right? So, you have to learn the lingo with it. But basically the takeaway with this is that, with this real world performance monitoring, it's also saying like, it's on the market. but you're also doing, based on if you get, a bigger data set, or if you're at a specific image, these types of things with that. So this is the GMLP in graphical form, like that top 10 list. Are there any questions at this point? So feel free. So you could, raise your hand with us. And so this next section is basically, these are things you find on YouTube, and they're good discussions. Now, was at MIT with Mark Shervey on the left, and then Andy Corvos on the right. And it was a different perspective, because they say with this is that the FDA, you sometimes want to look at it from their perspective, hundreds, if not thousands, of different types of medical devices. There is a large stack of different types of medical data. And this was kind of interesting, because a lot of the other kind of videos I watch, and, the FDA documentation, these types of things, FDA verification would be, does the device actually measure what occurred? Okay. So if there was 10 things that happened, in the human body, and it only picked up 9, or it got all 10. Okay. So that's verification. Now, validation is different. They say, do the results actually mean something to the patient population? So I think that's the step where a lot of us, you have to go back to the drawing board and do surveys and, find out these things. But like, what's the significance? And a lot of this, if it's like convolutional neural nets, and for those just joining, there was FDA announced the annual, so this only happens once a year, 170 plus new approvals. So if it's more like, if there's any transformers in this year's batch compared to convolutional neural nets, these are, synonymous with vision, or, better classification, object detection, stuff like that for validation. Now, what they said is that basically, so Andy said this is basically these technologies create excitement in the industry. Decentralized clinical trials like telemedicine for Parkinson's monitoring. Software now affects multiple parts of the system at different time points. So it could be partial diagnosis here, full diagnosis here. And again, like, it's a sliding scale as far as how much authority that we're giving AI ML over, not using, artificial intelligence. And we're gaining trust with this, and technology is improving, these types of things. So this is a quote from Andy. So she said, digital tools are blurring the line between measuring, diagnosing, and intervening. Okay. So these are different levels of steps of, and especially like how you submitted your device, it's harder to move up to, like, say, between measuring and to diagnosing, and then intervening would be, even more control given to the computer, which is it's done a lot now. So if you haven't ever done FDA AI ML, and you want like a ground up start, and this does get technical, so I've had to watch this a couple times. So this is Zach Harned, and this is a Stanford call that he was on. He's got a separate law firm. So it just seems to be spot on as far as, like, he'll create his own timeline of 10 things, and the documents that I'm sharing is just a brief thing that he'll cover. But basically, he said, FDA oversees over 6,700 different medical device product categories, and the rules and regulations are binding. So that means that they're bound to the law. They have the force of the law. And guidance, which is most of it, what I've been sharing, the more recent stuff, which would take a lot longer to make into laws and, rules and regulations, should be followed, but they're not technically binding. But you probably wouldn't get approved if you were not following GMLP, ACP, SPS, the protocols. Now, this next part here is basically keeping up with technology. So the FDA I shared the PEAK one, which was for patient engagement, having these forums with white papers. I've read most of the more recent ones. And then this is the whole change from, say, like locked algorithm, which doesn't change. It's submitted and it's approved, but you don't make anything change to it, because, people were still not 100% sure of AI in medical at previous times. So the FDA, a benefit of continuously learning algorithms is you can address data drift, whereas in locked algorithms you can't. So obviously there's pros and cons, but like the whole basis with FDA is probable benefit over probable risk. So with these continuously learning algorithms, over the course of time, based on new patient data as it comes in after it's approved, that these are outweighing the consequences or the risks of the technology where locked algorithms used to be the mainstay. And that's what he says. So locked algorithms could be hamstringing AI to some degree, and that they wanted the ability to learn in case there's data drift, right? So again, so if you're just starting in FDA or AI ML, definitely watch some of Zach's videos. There's a Harvard one out there too. Now, this next one is interesting. So this is Dr. Scott Gottlieb, and he was a previous FDA commissioner. Now, it might shock you how advanced this is, because a lot of times we're talking like, okay, it's taking medical much longer. I don't see there's going to be that much of a delay as much as we've seen in the past with the FDA, because the potential benefit of using AI ML models is great in many cases, and you just can't ignore that despite some of the potential risk with it. And that's what he said is basically this talk that he gave was on large language models, and he was interviewed by this is more like a business talk. They should be regulated as medical devices. The issue is if you have Chat GPT or Llama or some of these other kind of open models that you can use, is those are all trained on everything, as much data as they can get, anything from cooking to whatever. So obviously these medical-based LLMs would probably be a lot smaller in data set sizes and not include the totality of the internet, basically. And again, it all comes down to like how much control we want to give computers, because trying to integrate large language models into healthcare with physicians is an issue, right? Like people went many, many years to school for this, and they have experience, and there's things that computers can miss, and there's also things that computers are a lot better at, like sifting through huge amounts of data. And it's more likely to have this augmented interactions with physician now to include a large language model. So you may interact, and this is a quote, and he said, you may interact with a large language model, and that model will help make decisions about whether or not it's good to make adjustments in your medications, right? It's kind of like the first layer, and it's trying to improve the quality of the first with the doctor's visit. So have the computer kind of like get these first screenings, make this process a whole lot more efficient. So the people that are really sick, can go to the doctor or are getting that right away, as opposed to other people that don't know what their conditions are. Anyways, talking or texting or talking to a large language model, can take on some of the responsibility to also engage with your physician with. Okay, so are there any questions at this point? So this next section is going to be quantum-inspired machine learning. And this is basically, there's a QCware, which is up in San Francisco Bay Area. They had a long list of things that you can work on in quantum computing. And this is the one highlighted in green, right? Because it's using bits to simulate qubits. Okay, so this is all computational. And other places too, there was just a big review on this. So quantum-inspired machine learning, a review. I think that's the name of the title. And it really goes into in detail. And it's not that much different than classical. It's just that you're doing stuff with the bits, and now you're incorporating quantum physics or quantum mechanics. But it's not this radical thing, even though it's very usable today. I use it all the time, as far as like the models are available today. So the thing with it is it's actually classical data generating and classical processing. So this is not a quantum computer with a bunch of noise that, has other issues that it can't, fit in. It can't basically keep up with quantum machine learning workflows. It's more like assigning these bits. So I try to put it a couple different ways. So bits behaving according to quantum mechanics to make qubits or quantum bits. And you can go Q trits, Q quarts, however you want. So a 10-dimensional, even more than that. It's basically anything that you could do with quantum physics, you can do with a quantum simulator, but not on quantum hardware. at this stage, and likely for many years. Some bits are for the notebook. So when you go to launch a Colab notebook, and you've got Python, or you can have PyTorch, and you're going to need Qiskit or PennyLane or TensorFlow Quantum. That's still in bits. Now, the ones that have the quantum algorithm, which is it takes a lot of RAM to do. There's other bits for that, for simulating qubits. And these qubits are free of quantum noise and compatible with machine learning workflows of today. So you can do a quantum-inspired machine learning. The issue right now is getting that better performance even over standard, machine learning, right? So our understanding of data sets and quantum physics and these types of things. So the current generation of simulator PQC algorithms, every classical algorithm can be simulated using quantum mechanics. The advantages of simulators, beyond that they just don't have quantum noise, they can get the exact answer right away, right? It's performing linear algebra on quantum algorithms, right? And there's none of this, fuss with like the hardware of like it can't keep up with differentiation. And the other thing that marks it as a usable technology today is you have pure states, which are represented with the ket notation. So there's raw and there's ket. And now ket, instead of using more complex density matrices that you would have to use in other techniques, we have a pure form of quantum mechanics available to start incorporating into machine learning. And we call that the big thing at the top is quantum machine learning. The more specific thing, as far as the practical one, is quantum inspired machine learning. Now, the quantum circuit. So, if you're familiar with deep learning neural networks, they're actually they have a linear component to them and a non-linear. So, in a quantum circuit, that's the linear component, the algorithm, and then when it gets measured, it goes back into binary. Into bits, so it's a 0 or 1. That's nonlinear. Okay, so we have all these analogs, and everything, like I said, is up and running. It's just we're trying to get better performance with it. And what's needed for these workflows, you need PennyLane, which is the leading QML platform. There's Qiskit, which is IBM's. They have some demos. TensorFlow Quantum, and they put out some material as well. And then, people build off the Tensor, which is Google. So TensorFlow, you typically need Google Circ with that, which is, quantum algorithms. Now, the quantum simulator actually is basic linear algebra subroutine. So this is matrix, and matrix vector products, which is we're already doing that today, with just bits. Simulated qubits, it's basically the same thing. It's just it takes a lot more RAM. Now, the option for multi-threaded CPUs or multi-node GPUs exists to improve speed. So as far as something technology that people just don't know about, you have to know about QML or KML is what we call it, quantum inspired. Now, here's the first case here, and I double checked. So typically, you can run different devices, but you can actually have PennyLane on your laptop, run it locally, and it does both the quantum algorithms and the classical algorithms at the same time. Now, the way that I assign these, and some of these, like if you have more than like 100 core Xeon processor to do all of this, and it's doing some of the classical algorithms here, quantum algorithms over here, I assigned it low CPU processing. You would typically not, this would be something like a really small algorithm. You could potentially use this for inference, which is kind of like the final stage it's like when you have like a low number of images in medical that you need to test after the model's been trained. And then parameters are actually based on RAM. So I set to low RAM, so I gave it low. And then the other thing here, the probable benefit, I had it medium. There's potential to have data set mapping on different parts of the quantum bit. This could be something that could happen in the future as far as having some benefit. But with this type of setup, single CPU, it's likely to be in this kind of lower territory here. Now, this next one here is a setup that I use all the time. So I'm using classical notebook. The quantum simulator, which actually, chugs through this algorithm, such as the one on the right. And it's popular, right? So this would be like on the left with your notebook. So it's like, it's written in Python. You could have PyTorch, and I'll get to some of those models a little bit later on. But in this case, we're going to use Qiskit as the notebook. And then over here for the quantum simulator as a second device, we're going to have another CPU. So to know that you actually have two separate devices, I could run in PennyLane and I could queue up the, this Qiskit quantum simulator here. And that for sure, like you're on two separate devices. So I think some of the cases is that you're on a single device. And what this means for medical is basically eliminating complexity, right? So, if we can already process something with a CPU, with classical algorithms and the same CPU with quantum ones, but typically something like this. This is going to be like say for instance, like a default.qubit in PennyLane. And Qiskit, it's like a Qiskit.air, AER. They have state vector, they have chasm simulator, and you can choose. And these are typically free. They're free simulators. Actually, IBM's, their notebook portion called Lab is traditionally free unless you need a lot more RAM or some other bump in GPUs, then you might have to pay. So what I assign for this is CPU processing, because I'm separating the tasks between the notebook and the quantum simulator. I'm setting that to medium low as far as benefit. And then parameters, or say medium low RAM for medium low number of parameters. So just like with neural nets today with ChatGPT, it has trillions of parameters associated with better performance or a better application. With quantum bits, you probably don't have to get nearly that high because the quantum bits have a lot more information in them. But typically it's associated that if the model's set up correctly, an increase in number of parameters can help with the performance of the model. And then this last one, probable benefit, I put it as medium. It has some more working parts. But again, I think with a lot of these, and here's actually a good example. So this is on the left. So I'm in communications with how exactly these things work because I run a lot, and I've run a single GPU with a specific notebook here. And I think that in Colab, this is Google Colab, that you can actually queue up a single GPU, and the RAM is shared between what's needed to process the classical deep learning neural net and also the quantum simulator with the algorithm. So if that's not the case, so that would be two devices, because you always need a CPU and then a GPU that would do both, the deep learning part, like a ResNet or something. And I've done this notebook before. And then also to do the quantum simulator as well. So it's analyzing the complexities of these, and basically, I've run this, and I've run it in a Colab notebook. I ran it with PennyLane, but a lot of things in PennyLane you can do Qiskit. It's not always the case because there's certain things that you can't. And so what I set for this is GPU processing because of using a single or double GPUs, medium. Parameters based on RAM. So these things, so if you want to go up in parameters, you don't always need to go up in GPU processing for this specific one. And then with this, probable benefit over probable risk, I'm setting to medium still. It's got some working parts to it. I don't think the performance is that great at this point using a single GPU or two GPUs. Now, this one in specific, I'm setting this to TensorFlow Quantum for my quantum library, and then also, NVIDIA single or double GPUs. Now, the gate model architectures that we have are based in, I think, early 2010s for quantum algorithms. Now, this is an issue because there's things that you can do with quantum simulators you cannot do with quantum hardware. So the whole thing of trying to make these backwards compatible, we need specific, and they're probably going to be gateless circuits, specifically for quantum simulators in order to get the performance up, right? Because right now our understanding of huge data sets with qubits, we don't know exactly, right? But there's been some elementary papers. So Maria Scholl, she's at Xanadu. There's Seth Lloyd and he's at MIT. There's Kristen Temme, he's at IBM, and they focus on mapping, simple data sets, like 2 data sets on different parts of a quantum bit. And basically the limiting factor here in this whole thing is the quantum physics plus bits. Is that going to outdo a lot of just having bits by themselves, like how we're doing it today? So for this one, for GPU processing, same medium RAM. I'm saying with a bigger algorithm, get up the benefit and basically performance of this all. And then for this next one is basically, this is multi-GPU. So this is my last case for these 5. And having a multi-GPU will increase processing, so this will cut down on speed. And parameters, like I said, with parameters, like in neural or ChatGPT, they're typically based on RAM, right? Like especially in quantum, these simulated qubits, the more RAM, the more parameters, right? So I set it to higher RAM. And then the probable benefit, I also set this to medium high. So you could see, there's a couple factors in play, but it's not that, like, it's all like NVIDIA, PennyLane, NERSC, and Brookhaven Lab is running a similar type of experiment with multi-GPUs over 250. So these things are getting scaled up because the technology works. It's just pinpointing these exact things to use simulated qubits for, with the physics, such as data set mapping or feature mapping, compared to how we traditionally do this classically. And then what we see here is basically this, is that inference, so this final step, will be slower than today's classical methods if you have a quantum algorithm due to this, RAM-consuming quantum simulation. Now, I didn't talk about this too much, but PyTorch or TensorFlow or these types of things, PyTorch you can use with Qiskit and PennyLane. So in the same notebook, you can have classical algorithm plus quantum algorithm. But in the case of, something that's bigger, you can have like a deep learning neural network, like a ResNet or vision transformer, and have a quantum algorithm. So there's many possibilities of mixing these around. And there needs to be more funding, for quantum inspired for sure, because we have working technology, and other experts have said this is, basically the field to focus on, and especially because QML or quantum machine learning is the principal application and will be for machine learning. So, as far as trying to fix hardware and all that kind of stuff, those are, it's anytime soon, it's not going to be, right? It's just it's too much noise. And I kind of put in one of these here. You just, there's differentiation issues with it, those types of things. So you can't get exact values right away, and then the algorithms. So anyways, so if there were quantum hardware to pop up in the next 5 years, this is on the right track of implementing that. And whatever gains we have here, and even if this remains the core technology, this is the area to focus in my opinion. So the other thing is that, certain things, and PennyLane's been so worked up with this. It's the leading QML platform. And a lot of times, like, they'll have JAX and NumPy, for optimizers and, very specific things. And for Qiskit in specific, it's just PyTorch. And then TensorFlow Quantum, I think it's just, you could use Keras or you could use TensorFlow, and you're going to be using Cirq. But typically, like, the emerging stuff is with the bigger PennyLane right now for QML. Now, next generation, and I've touched on this, but the limiting factor in all this stuff, without even looking at any of this, is basically how much quantum physics will help bits process data sets better. By this, I mean lower losses, higher accuracies. It could mean faster speeds in indirect ways, right? Because when you're putting a qubit next to a bit, it's always going to be slower. But if you can figure out something, a new utility, with quantum physics using bits, then you're onto a potential path of, quantum benefit. So, like I said, like, there's been some studies with these binary data sets with Seth Lloyd and Kristen Temme and Maria Schall, these researchers, but taking it to the next levels is what's needed, right? Because, there you also have superpositioning and entanglement and quantum interference to help as well. And the emphasis needs to be placed on these architectures that aren't meant to be reverse compatible with quantum hardware, because we kind of set up this gate model, and yet you can actually operate hardware, differently, but they need to be like the ones that we can get benefit today. And they're all in theory accessible, right? It just has to be on paper where it's like, oh, okay, this means this should work. Okay, let's do it. And so this last section here is basically advancing real-world QML, mainstream performance. And I looked at all these timelines of classical neural nets and deep learning. There's this one after the multi-layer perceptron was first thought of, and is called LaNet. And it's 1998, and then the big breakthrough for classical deep learning at that time was around this time, late 90s, early 2000s, where GPUs and processing power was getting a lot better, a lot more practical. And I say we're heading towards a 2012 AlexNet with quantum. So what I mean by this is that they did ImageNet with AlexNet, and that's 1,000 classes. In most use cases, unless you're like many GPUs, you're not going to be up with that many images and that many classes, right? So that's kind of where I'm putting this at, is, somewhere between 98 and 2012 as far as, quantum performance or its hybrid model performance. Now, the more advanced one I touched on this is this PennyLane NVIDIA. NVIDIA has also done big GPU studies, like 700 plus GPUs, NERSC, and they use 256 GPUs. And this is apparently for more parameters, right? So it's the same thing like classical. Is like, in general, people refer to deep learning neural nets by the number of parameters. However, it's not always the case that that specific model can benefit from more, right? It depends on other factors, but that's typically how we track deep learning classically. And I kind of touched on this before, is even if we had a noise-free quantum computer, which is still many, many years away, so we're still in density matrices, there's issues with differentiation. So for instance, like in quantum inspired, we have adjoint differentiation, which is like backpropagation for classical, and it's efficient. Whereas you can only use, say, like parameter shift rule, maybe one or a couple others for hardware, but it's like exponentially slower, more and more parameters. And then exact states, like I said, like with this, we're calculating the exact circuits to produce an answer right away. And that's an issue with quantum hardware, is probabilistic, and you have to run many shots. And that's not always the case for simulators, but we can do that. And also with algorithms, like I said, there's certain algorithms that can't run on hardware that you could use on simulators. And if we can get benefit now, I don't think, like I said, like today was the shocker news, as FDA announced today 170 plus of their approvals. So that only happens once a year. It's just one announcement. So here's some quotes. So FDA believes in AI ML, and in specific continuously learning, not locked algorithms. So have the potential to transform healthcare by deriving new and important insights from the vast amount of data generated during the delivery of healthcare every day. So what this means is you have your algorithm, it's on a computer, it's already approved, it's in the possession of a healthcare system, and they can change it to certain degrees with data sets and other fine tunings to make it even better, and avoid data drift if you can. So medical device manufacturers use AI ML to innovate their products to better assist healthcare providers and improve patient care. So that's what it's all about. So patient safety, you'll hear safety and efficacy is a common term that's used. And then also AI ML benefits in its ability to learn from real world use and experience, and its capability to improve its performance, right? So this may be news for some people that, typically you think with a big governing body, you can only have a single submission and you can't change anything with that, as far as trying to make it better after the case of approval. But that's not the case. So this is the total life, the total life of the product is basically, and this falls under ACP and SDS as well. Awesome. Are there any questions at this point? So any specific slides? And, feel free to put in the chat. So you could also, raise your hand as well if you have a question. Okay. Okay, so I know people. I know at least one person is more quantum, and then obviously this has to reach applications. And after this study, I fully believe that it's a lot closer to FDA submission, than what other people think. Right? It's basically linear algebra now on qubits instead of bits. But it's derived from quantum, or it's derived from classical bits. So as far as like practical, safe, no quantum noise, quantum physics with data sets, a potential for, it's a different way of running, data through specific hybrid models. And I saw, a couple people came a little bit later, and if you had any questions, feel free to ask. It's like I said, I think the big bump we're over with the FDA, this discovery process of all the factors. I think we're definitely over that point. And, we're definitely, on to, it's a science now. You have your algorithm on the market, what you can and can't change, those types of things, so it's a lot closer than I thought, and especially with the quantum physics part too. Okay, so we had a question here. So could you provide the links? Yeah, of the Dr. Gottlieb, and okay, yeah. So the presentation will be posted on the site, LinkedIn, on GitHub, likely too. This particular one, I didn't do any code, but I also have a ton of code up. If you want to get started on some models. Those are all up in GitHub. There's a specific FDA folder. So actually, I'll give you the link. And then I'm going to put it in there too. So these will be, and there's multiple discussions that I've done on FDA as well that kind of build up to this. So I want to talk a little bit about lists. So these FDA lists, 521 last year. So that what they're saying is add another at least 170 plus for this year, or actually the remainder of last year plus this year. And then there's a portion of this, October through December that won't be included. And I focused a lot on these. I did some Prisma studies on the list. So if you know Prisma studies, is basically you have a huge set of whatever data, or in this case it's FDA approvals, and then I narrowed it down to say like 191 that were brain related, neurology, and then I further did say for instance from there those that were segmentation algorithms based on what the approval said, and then reconstruction algorithms, and those were like another I don't know, like 30 or 40 total between those two. But it helps, helps to do some studies, because I think the one that you didn't mention actually there, the gentleman, the lawyer in the middle of those two other ones, he was he takes apart, and I've done this too. So you look at a submission, and I'll look for buzzwords that I'm looking for. So say if I'm looking for brain, so that's like head, neck, brain. The head is a more legal term. I think it kind of keeps you out of other things because the brain is complex. But, that's how I did that specific one, is I would actually read the approvals and then kind of define. So say, for instance, if there's a quantum algorithm, for reconstruction, which, by the way, Seth Lloyd has done an ideal case for that. I don't know if that one's, that we can do anytime soon. But he's done studies on that, and there's been segmentation algorithms with quantum. There's been a lot as far as the research with equivalence to a lot of these FDA approvals. So I've done a fair number of those in the last 10 approvals from last year, and different regulatory IEC, ISO, the different requirements listed in the specific FDA approvals. And it's just you just learn these things, right? Because some form of quantum computing, and I definitely think this is the most practical version, will be coming, as especially if we figured out, this thing in specific with this huge data set better with quantum here. Right now we're waiting on the performance, where the rest is pretty much taken care of, right? They're working notebooks, right? Any other questions? And I'll probably, be focused on medical for a little while longer, because you always have to find applications for emerging technology. And there's been, based on this current PQC architecture that's backwards compatible with, real hardware, at least 8, 9, 10 medical image classification quantum algorithm papers. A lot of them are built off of the PennyLane quantum transfer learning model, where you'll have a deep learning classical network, so like a ResNet, and then you'll also have, a smaller quantum algorithm. And we know, like, as far as like, there's not a huge advantage in using like gate-based algorithms for, simulators, based on our knowledge of data sets and, the quantum physics behind it. It's just like a crude thing. So like I said, like, we need to move from the 1998 Linnet to like a 2012 AlexNet. Okay. So we're not at AlexNet, like we don't typically do 1,000 classes with many, many images in a hybrid model, partly because of RAM, but I haven't seen anything that big. But like, every technology has to develop. Any other questions? You can put that in the chat as well. I'm trying to think what else. So this is on the medical quantum machine learning. It's the GitHub, and it's the leading quantum machine learning healthcare repository on the web. So, if you're just starting off with code, and, if you want to focus on FDA, there's many multimodal imaging, explainable AI, kind of touching on those, quantum federated learning. That's a big thing that medical wants to get into. Quantum GANs, or generative adversarial networks. A lot, there's some work in that too. And there's other, there's code, code for Qiskit, TensorFlow Quantum, actually more Circ, and lots of PennyLane. And there's sections, right? So that's code, and there's another directory. It's called Code 2, and then Code 2 has full PDFs as far as like, the history of quantum algorithms, how to do it embedding with quantum, with classical data. There's a software stacks, you name it. So I think, so everything needs a defining moment, and the results that we get from this, basically it's Brookhaven and NERSC with NVIDIA, and PennyLane on the Perlmutter supercomputer, and PennyLane also announced Australian supercomputer, ties with. So, it's getting kind of close, because it's like, okay, all we need is more RAM, or all we need is more GPUs, like our model works, to get our performance. Hopefully we'll get some of that defining moments, that'll pull people from medical and other, specific applications too. So Edwin or Heike, do you have anything?
Thank you for all these the resources, especially you share, like especially on LinkedIn. They're very exhaustive, and yeah. So yeah, but my question, I think, was what's the latest on LLMs, and there was a slide I saw you share on LLMs and their use in health. What has been approved?
For quantum, or just like mainstream?
Or just AI and ML?
Yeah. Well, they're used a lot. So I know, say for instance, ChatGPT, so if you get on, so this is a free service. It's by Open AI, if you don't know that. Now there were limitations, and some of them still remain. So, say for instance, the last time data was added is September 2021, right? So, in certain cases, you'll have to use like Google or Bing search if you need the most recent. The last thing I heard with ChatGPT is they're adding these now you can do, I think, image to text, where it was always text, it's just text. So they also have a service called Dolly, which is basically text to image. Like if I did do this, by the way, I type in a quantum computer on my desk, and then it presents something that it saw on the web, right? So yeah, they added some OpenAI stuff. I think the huge limitation, right? Even though they keep training, because it's the data set is fixed. I think even for Chat GPT 4, the it's just adding some kind of these supplementary things that you could also do instead of just like typing in, like you just I think you can show it an image. It hasn't popped up on mine yet. Maybe it's Chat GPT 4, but I mean the
Yeah,
biggest
I
the
think
biggest
I
yeah, go
think
ahead.
yeah, they have become multimodal, and actually the reason why I even asked this question is on Twitter after it went multimodal, which was like about 2-3 weeks ago. I saw someone had actually you can also query it with audio, and someone had tried to like have a session, like a psychology session with it, and they were saying that it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I mean, it's all going to get better, because when they say classical gets better, but quantum can't keep up. But if you're using classical bits to simulate qubits and you're using physics in a certain way to get better, accuracy, lower loss, then it does keep up. But it's got like the hardware just has so many the issues on its own. But as far as I thought you were going to ask about quantum LLMs, and that just there's actually a paper I could share for that one. They actually said it's basically left the theoretical realm. Like they're typically very heavy on parameters, I would say. So it's in specific, it's this paper, and you could search for all these applications, but it's hard to keep up with everything in classical and everything in quantum.
Well, I think that's interesting too. I'd be interested to read that.
Yeah, yeah, and
The
like I said,
quantum
like
LLM.
all of these things, you need efficient differentiation. Like machine learning is not just one thing, right? It's like you have mini batches and you have a single epoch. And then, for each mini batch, the parameters are optimized. And then from epoch to the next epoch, more optimization. So you need a method, and we want quantum machine learning, that this is really the only way to do it. So they have all these use cases of, I got a fair amount from medical on it. I saw some LLM stuff, and you could just search by application if you're looking for that. So, that's what we're looking at, is basically sifting through all this algorithm stuff. And there's the gate model, there's non-gate models, there's other types of ways of running quantum circuits that we have to be not running just whatever the demos have, right? Even if we have like 26, 27 PennyLanes, 12 kits, I've done all those, right? So, whatever algorithms we can use to, even if it's something simple, like do binary classification and prove, that this set over here and that set over here with superpositioning and entanglement and quantum interference, but there's not as much work of that as opposed to the hardware, which is the issue, right? Because we want QML right now, so approvable, so NIH or FDA to get funding or approvals, something that is safe for patient data, like the noise isn't going to interfere with it.
Okay. I was asking about the LLMs because I was actually worried about, they've been having this issue with the hallucination.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes in inexact or wrong information they're prone to that. So yeah, I was wondering what FDA saying about LLMs
Oh,
and
as far as
well.
this the Scott talk or Dr. Scott Gottlieb. Yeah, it's interesting because obviously if you watch that CNBC out, and again I'll have this up and you can get to the links. And he he sounds like a huge proponent of getting LLM through on a data set that's not including all this other world stuff that we don't need. And yeah, that's always an issue, like limiting. I think you'll get less of hallucinations if your data set's more under control. Like say for instance, we know like 200 images or like 2,000 or 20,000 medical images here, and we knew who took them. It's like medical data. It's not just like somebody somebody influencing the data set because it's including everything, right? So I think that'll be less, if you have a more defined data sets as far as hallucinations, I would say.
Yeah,
And I
yeah. But I think there's something called of late there's something called retrieval augmented generation, and it's kind of being brought to make give the LLM more context into the issue that it's been the current topic. Yeah, but there was some case that I don't know. It happened in the legal sector. There's a case in the U.S. that involves a rapper who and a trial. His case has just he's just gone for another trial because they said the lawyer used an LLM and it brought an error in his closing argument. And it's kind of concerning because the company that provided the the software, this AI, it's called high level AI, and they're saying that it was only trained only on a data set that involved only the case specific document, but it's kind of strange how it was still able to make the error.
Yeah. I mean, and I could be wrong with this, but like a lot of this, in my opinion, is the representation of the data. So say, for instance, if somebody says an incorrect thing about that's a well-known thing, and all of a sudden it's, returned to you on, chat that this is, this, but it's not actually that. So I, like I said, I think that the medical stuff and what Mr. Gottlieb was saying, and you can watch it too, is well deserving of the LLM stuff. The issue seems to be more like, okay, so if I call up an LLM, you know, and I'm giving it this information, like, like I said, for some of it, it can help, but I think the bigger issue is that doctors are overbooked. And using this service, you can make that argument. You can get your doctor faster if you have a valid case, right? So it's kind of like pre-screening those that are seriously unhealthy versus those that, they have a misunderstanding of their health condition. So, I totally see this, and I think that he's right in pushing it, that, these things, and probably multiple LLMs, not just a single one, right? Because this will be for medical images, or this will be for genomics, or at least up front, or at least to start, right? And then start to get into multimodal, with it. And basically, his talk was more on like a patient actually is calling, or communicating with the LLM, or texting, or these types of things. And how much power can the LLM have as far as saying, like, here's the script, or the next step is go to the doctor, or these types of things. It's more like the stuff that we've already been through with this, the AI ML with, oh, like your data set is biased. And then when you go to change it, and now that affects the accuracy or the performance of that, right? So, we've kind of faced some of these issues before. It's just like with an LLM, it's typically associated with being big, like
Yeah.
useful, powerful.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Sure. Sure. Thank you.
Yeah. So, keep your eyes posted. It's I as far as like the medical work I've seen with the quantum circuits, they tend to just be doing the same thing. It's the same thing, and I did it too. Like I went from 2 to 4 to 10 to 44 classes, more and more images, having, concluding similar, if not a little bit better accuracy, or, actually at least one of them, a lot better, but not against the best one that I could find, that was classical, that use a different method. Anyways, the quantum circuit versus the deep learning neural network. The deep learning neural network at this time has more parameters, and it has a greater influence on the outcome or the performance of the model. Whereas the quantum circuit, based on our understandings of it and, limited parameters, these types of things, that contributed less, right? And that makes sense, right? Because we're not even there to, I don't think, to AlexNet, if we're in this LaCoon or this previous model, classically speaking. So yeah, it just takes time. If you were to track, that was happening, these were happening decades ago. More parameters, better architectures, that's, I think, coming to our way. Anything else? Anybody else we haven't heard from? So then, like I said, I'll have this up, and let's see here. Okay. Awesome. So yeah, check LinkedIn, GitHub. If you need code, it's on GitHub. So yeah, this has been discussion 105, Thursday, October 19th, 2023, the same day that the annual FDA announcement was made. So that's pretty awesome. And this has been for FDA AI ML medical device guidelines with potential QML submissions. Thanks everybody for coming. Have a good rest of the night and have a productive rest of the week. Take care, everybody. Bye.